Turmeric might be the single most studied natural compound in all of modern supplement research, and also one of the most poorly understood by the people taking it every day. It sits in spice racks and supplement bottles all over the world, marketed as a near-universal anti-inflammatory cure-all. And there is genuine science behind that reputation, thousands of studies, real mechanisms, real clinical trials. But here is what almost nobody tells you. The way most people take turmeric, the way it is most commonly sold, and the way it is most commonly combined or not combined with other things, means that the vast majority of people using it are getting only a small fraction of the benefit the research actually shows is possible. There is a specific reason for this, rooted in basic biochemistry. And once you understand it, the entire way you think about taking turmeric changes. In this video, we are going through exactly what the research shows turmeric and its active compound curcumin can genuinely do, the critical do's that determine whether you get any meaningful benefit at all, the don'ts that quietly waste your time and your money, and who needs to be cautious about using it. By the end, you will know exactly how to take this supplement in a way that actually works. Part 1. What turmeric and curcumin actually are. Turmeric is a flowering plant in the ginger family, and the part used in cooking and supplementation is its root, which is dried and ground into the bright yellow-orange powder most people recognize from curries and other dishes. Turmeric has a long history of use in traditional Ayurvedic and Chinese medicine systems, stretching back thousands of years, primarily for its anti-inflammatory and digestive properties. The compound responsible for the majority of turmeric's studied health effects is called curcumin. Curcumin belongs to a class of compounds called curcuminoids. And while turmeric root contains several different curcuminoids, curcumin itself typically makes up only around 2 to 5% of raw turmeric powder by weight. This is an important detail to hold on to because it explains a great deal about why sprinkling turmeric on your food, while not harmful, delivers a meaningfully smaller dose of the active compound than most people assume. Curcumin's research footprint is genuinely enormous. It has been studied for effects on inflammation, oxidative stress, joint health, brain health, mood, blood sugar regulation, and even certain markers related to cardiovascular health. The challenge with curcumin has never really been a lack of interest from researchers or a lack of promising laboratory findings. The challenge has been almost entirely about getting curcumin to actually do something useful once it is inside the human body. And that is where we need to spend a significant amount of time in this video, because it changes everything about how this supplement should actually be used. Part 2. The fundamental problem with curcumin. Before we get into what the research shows curcumin can do, we need to address the single most important fact about this compound, because it explains the majority of disappointing results people experience and the majority of the do's and don'ts we are about to cover. Curcumin has remarkably poor bioavailability on its own. Bioavailability refers to the proportion of a substance that actually gets absorbed into your bloodstream and becomes available for your body to use. When curcumin is consumed by itself, in its standard powdered form, only a very small percentage of it is absorbed. The vast majority simply passes through your digestive system and is eliminated without ever reaching your bloodstream in a meaningful concentration. There are several specific reasons for this poor absorption. First, curcumin has very low solubility in water, and your digestive system relies heavily on water-based processes to absorb compounds from the foods and supplements you consume. Second, curcumin is rapidly metabolized in the intestinal wall and in the liver, through processes that chemically transform it before it ever reaches general circulation, in a phenomenon researchers refer to as rapid systemic elimination. Third, curcumin is also rapidly broken down and eliminated once it does enter the bloodstream, meaning even the small amount that gets absorbed does not stay in your system for very long. Put all of this together and you get a compound with extraordinary laboratory and test tube anti-inflammatory effects that, when consumed in its raw, unmodified form, struggles to reach the concentrations in the human body that would be needed to replicate those laboratory findings. This single fact is the reason an entire industry of curcumin absorption enhancement technologies has developed, And it is the reason that understanding how you take curcumin matters just as much, if not more, than the simple decision to take it at all. With that foundation clearly established, let us go through what the research actually shows when curcumin is taken in a way that successfully gets around this absorption problem. Part 3. Do pair curcumin with black pepper. This is widely considered one of the single most important and most well-established pieces of practical knowledge in the entire curcumin research literature, and it deserves to be the very first do on this list. Black pepper contains a compound called piperine, which is responsible for pepper's pungent, sharp taste. Piperine has been shown in clinical research to dramatically increase the bioavailability of curcumin. A frequently cited study found that combining curcumin with a small amount of piperine increased curcumin's bioavailability in human subjects by an extraordinary 2,000%. That is not a typo or an exaggeration. The combination of curcumin and piperine produced blood concentrations of curcumin roughly 20 times higher than curcumin taken alone. The mechanism behind this effect involves piperine's ability to inhibit the specific metabolic processes responsible for curcumin's rapid breakdown in the intestinal wall and liver that we discussed in the previous section. By temporarily slowing down those elimination pathways, piperine allows substantially more curcumin to survive the journey into your bloodstream intact. This is precisely why traditional culinary use of turmeric in many cuisines, particularly across South Asia, very often pairs turmeric with black pepper in the same dish, even though this culinary tradition long predates the modern scientific understanding of why the combination works so well. Traditional food wisdom got there first, and modern research has since explained the mechanism behind it. Many modern curcumin supplements now include piperine directly in their formulation specifically to take advantage of this effect, typically labeled as a black pepper extract or under the trade name Bioperine, which is one of the most extensively studied standardized piperine extracts. If you are taking a curcumin supplement, checking whether it includes piperine or bioperine on the ingredient label is one of the single most important things you can check, because a supplement without it is very likely delivering a small fraction of the absorption that an equivalent dose would achieve with piperine included. Part 4. Do take it with a source of fat. The second critical absorption strategy relates to curcumin's chemical properties. Curcumin is fat-soluble rather than water-soluble, meaning it dissolves and is absorbed far more effectively in the presence of dietary fat than it is in a purely water-based environment. Research has shown that consuming curcumin alongside a meal containing fat significantly improves its absorption compared to taking curcumin on an empty stomach or with a fat-free meal. This is because dietary fat stimulates the release of bile from the gallbladder, and bile plays a critical role in helping the body absorb fat-soluble compounds, curcumin included, through the lining of the small intestine. The practical application of this is straightforward. If you are taking a curcumin supplement, take it with a meal that contains a reasonable amount of healthy fat rather than on an empty stomach or alongside a very low-fat meal. Good sources of fat to pair with your supplement include olive oil, avocado, nuts, eggs, or fatty fish, all of which would also independently support the kind of anti-inflammatory dietary pattern that complements curcumin's intended effects in the first place. Some of the more advanced curcumin supplement formulations on the market today address this fat solubility issue directly within the product itself, through what are called lipidated or phospholipid complexed formulations. These technologies bind curcumin to a fat-based carrier molecule before it ever reaches your digestive system, which can significantly improve absorption even without needing to deliberately time your dose around a fatty meal. We will discuss these advanced formulations further in a moment because they represent one of the more significant developments in curcumin supplementation in recent years. Part 5. Do consider an advanced bioavailability formulation. Beyond the simple combination of piperine and dietary fat, the supplement industry has developed several more sophisticated technologies specifically engineered to solve curcumin's bioavailability problem, and the research behind several of these technologies is genuinely substantial. One of the most well-studied approaches involves curcumin phospholipid complexes, sometimes referred to by the trade name Mariva. In this formulation, curcumin is bound to phosphatidylcholine, a phospholipid molecule that is naturally well absorbed by the body and is structurally similar to compounds found in cell membranes. Clinical studies using this specific formulation have demonstrated significantly improved bioavailability compared to standard curcumin, and several trials have used this particular formulation to study curcumin's effects on conditions like osteoarthritis, with promising results that we will return to later in this video. Another well-researched approach involves what are called nanoparticle or micellar curcumin formulations, where curcumin is broken down into extremely small particles or encapsulated within microstructures, both of which are engineered to dramatically increase the surface area and solubility of the compound, improving how readily it can be absorbed across the intestinal lining. Several studies using these formulations have demonstrated bioavailability improvements that, in some research, exceed even the improvements seen with the curcumin and piperine combination. A third approach combines curcumin with turmeric essential oils, which contain compounds that researchers believe help maintain higher and more sustained blood levels of curcumin over time compared to standard curcumin extract alone by slowing the rate at which curcumin is eliminated from the bloodstream after absorption. The practical takeaway from this section is that if you are serious about taking curcumin specifically to achieve the effects documented in clinical research, choosing a supplement that uses one of these advanced bioavailability formulations rather than a basic, unenhanced curcumin or turmeric powder capsule is likely to make a very significant difference in whether you actually experience any meaningful benefit at all. The research on basic, unenhanced curcumin has consistently struggled to demonstrate strong clinical effects, specifically because of the absorption problems discussed throughout this video, while the research using enhanced formulations has generally shown more consistent and more clinically meaningful results. Part 6. What the research shows. Curcumin can actually do. With the absorption issue addressed, let us go through the specific health outcomes where curcumin has the strongest clinical evidence behind it, assuming an appropriately bioavailable form and dose is used. The single area with the most extensive and most consistent clinical research is joint health, specifically osteoarthritis. Multiple randomized controlled trials and several meta-analyses pooling this research together have found that curcumin supplementation, generally using one of the enhanced bioavailability formulations discussed earlier, produces significant reductions in joint pain and significant improvements in physical function in people with osteoarthritis, particularly affecting the knee. Several of these trials have directly compared curcumin to standard over-the-counter anti-inflammatory medications and found comparable reductions in pain and stiffness, with curcumin generally producing fewer reported digestive side effects than the comparison medications. This does not mean curcumin should replace medication without a doctor's guidance, particularly for anyone with more severe joint disease, but it does represent one of the more robust and clinically meaningful applications of curcumin currently supported by the evidence. The second well-supported area is general inflammatory marker reduction. Curcumin has been shown across numerous studies to reduce blood levels of several key inflammatory markers, including C-reactive protein and several inflammatory cytokines in people with elevated baseline inflammation. Chronic. Low-grade inflammation is increasingly understood to be a contributing factor across a wide range of age-related health conditions, which is part of why curcumin's broad anti-inflammatory profile has generated so much research interest across so many different potential applications. The third area with meaningful evidence is mood and cognitive function. Several randomized controlled trials have found that curcumin supplementation was associated with improvements in symptoms of depression when used alongside standard treatment, and some studies have found modest improvements in measures of memory and attention, particularly in older adults. The proposed mechanism involves curcumin's antioxidant and anti-inflammatory properties, along with some preliminary evidence suggesting it may support levels of brain-derived neurotrophic factor, a protein involved in the growth and maintenance of neurons. This area of research, while promising, remains less extensive than the joint health research and would benefit from more and larger studies before strong conclusions can be drawn. The fourth area worth mentioning is metabolic health, specifically blood sugar regulation. Several studies and at least one meta-analysis have found that curcumin supplementation was associated with modest improvements in markers of blood sugar control, including fasting blood glucose and measures of insulin resistance in people with metabolic syndrome or type 2 diabetes. The effects observed in this research have generally been modest rather than dramatic, suggesting curcumin may be a reasonable complementary addition to a broader metabolic health strategy rather than a primary treatment on its own. Part 7. Don't expect meaningful results from culinary turmeric alone. This is one of the most important don'ts in this entire video, and it follows directly from everything covered about bioavailability. Sprinkling turmeric powder into your cooking is a wonderful culinary habit, and it is not without any benefit at all, but it is important to be realistic about what it can and cannot achieve compared to the doses and formulations used in the clinical research. As mentioned earlier, raw turmeric powder typically contains only around 2 to 5% curcumin by weight. A typical culinary serving of turmeric in a dish might contain somewhere in the range of a few hundred milligrams of turmeric powder, which translates to a relatively small dose of actual curcumin, often in the range of just a few to perhaps 20 or 30 milligrams, depending on the specific turmeric used and the quantity in the dish. Compare this to the clinical studies showing meaningful effects on joint pain or inflammatory markers, which typically used curcumin doses in the range of 500 to 2,000 milligrams per day of an enhanced bioavailability formulation specifically designed to maximize absorption. This does not mean cooking with turmeric is pointless. It is a flavorful spice with its own culinary value, and consistent dietary inclusion of anti-inflammatory foods generally is a reasonable part of a healthy eating pattern. But if your specific goal is to address joint pain, reduce measurable inflammatory markers, or achieve any of the other outcomes discussed in the clinical research, relying on culinary turmeric alone is very unlikely to get you there. That requires a properly dosed and properly formulated supplement taken consistently for the dose and absorption profile to match what was actually studied. Part 8. Don't expect immediate results. Curcumin is not a fast-acting compound in the way that, for example, a pain reliever or an anti-inflammatory medication might produce a noticeable effect within an hour or two of taking it. The clinical trials demonstrating meaningful benefits for joint pain, inflammatory markers, and mood generally ran for a minimum of 8 to 12 weeks before measuring outcomes, and many of the most positive results emerged from studies extending even longer than that. This reflects the underlying biology of how curcumin appears to work. Rather than producing an acute, immediate effect, the way some medications do, curcumin appears to work through a more gradual process of reducing chronic inflammatory signaling and oxidative stress over a sustained period of consistent use. If you take a curcumin supplement for a few days or a couple of weeks and conclude it is not working because you do not feel an immediate difference, you are very likely judging the supplement on a timeline that does not match how the research suggests it actually works. A reasonable trial period, based on the clinical evidence, is a minimum of 8 to 12 weeks of consistent daily use before evaluating whether it is providing a meaningful benefit for you specifically. Part 9. Don't ignore the quality and sourcing of your supplement. Turmeric and curcumin supplements are not immune to the broader quality control issues that affect the supplement industry generally, and there are some specific concerns worth being aware of with this particular ingredient. Several independent testing organizations and academic researchers have found that some turmeric products, both whole spice and supplement forms, sourced from certain regions and certain manufacturers, have been found to contain concerning levels of heavy metal contamination, particularly lead. This contamination has sometimes been linked to certain processing or adulteration practices in some supply chains, where compounds are sometimes added to turmeric powder to enhance its color and make it appear more vibrant and higher quality than it actually is. The practical recommendation here is to choose curcumin and turmeric products from reputable manufacturers that conduct and disclose third-party testing for heavy metals and contaminants. Products that carry independent testing certifications or that are transparent about sourcing their turmeric from regions with established quality control standards are a meaningfully safer choice than the cheapest unverified options available, particularly given that this is a supplement many people intend to take consistently over a long period of time. Part 10. Who should be cautious? While curcumin has a generally favorable safety profile in the research, particularly at studied doses, there are several specific situations where caution is genuinely warranted. Curcumin has mild blood-thinning properties, and there is a theoretical and, in some cases, documented concern about increased bleeding risk when curcumin is combined with blood-thinning medications, including warfarin and other anticoagulants, or with antiplatelet medications. Anyone taking these medications should discuss curcumin supplementation with their doctor before starting. And this conversation is particularly important if any surgery is planned, since curcumin supplementation is sometimes recommended to be paused in advance of surgical procedures for this same reason. People with gallbladder conditions, including gallstones or bile duct obstruction, should be cautious with curcumin, since it stimulates bile production and bile flow, which could theoretically worsen certain gallbladder-related conditions. This is worth discussing with your doctor if you have any history of gallbladder issues. Curcumin may also interact with certain medications metabolized by the liver, since some research suggests curcumin can influence specific liver enzyme pathways involved in drug metabolism. If you are taking any prescription medications, particularly ones with a narrow therapeutic window where small changes in blood concentration matter significantly, discussing curcumin with your doctor or pharmacist before adding it to your routine is a sensible precaution. And people with iron deficiency should be aware that curcumin has been shown in some research to potentially interfere with iron absorption when taken in very high doses over extended periods. So this is worth keeping in mind if you are managing iron deficiency anemia alongside curcumin supplementation, and is another reasonable topic to raise with your doctor. High doses of curcumin, particularly well above the ranges used in most clinical research, have also been associated in rare case reports with liver-related concerns, which reinforces the broader principle that more is not necessarily better when it comes to supplementation. And staying within the dosing ranges that were actually studied in the clinical research is a sensible approach. The bottom line: curcumin is one of the most extensively researched natural compounds available, with genuinely solid clinical evidence supporting its use for joint pain and osteoarthritis, general inflammatory marker reduction, and reasonably promising evidence for mood support and metabolic health. But virtually all of that benefit depends entirely on solving curcumin's fundamental bioavailability problem, which most people taking basic turmeric powder or unenhanced curcumin capsules are simply not addressing. If you want to take curcumin in a way that actually has a reasonable chance of replicating what the research shows, choose a supplement that either includes piperine or black pepper extract or uses one of the advanced bioavailability formulations like a phospholipid complex or micellar curcumin. Take it consistently with a meal containing some dietary fat. Give it a genuine 8 to 12-week trial before judging whether it is working, and choose a reputable brand that tests for contaminants. And if you fall into any of the cautionary categories discussed, particularly if you are on blood thinners, have gallbladder issues, or take medications metabolized by the liver, have that conversation with your doctor before starting. Done correctly, curcumin represents one of the more genuinely well-supported additions you can make to a long-term health routine. Done the way most people do it, sprinkled into food or taken as a basic unenhanced capsule, you are very likely getting a small fraction of what the research actually demonstrates is possible. Stay consistent